All right, everybody, we're going to get started today. We've got Queen Bees and Masterminds, a parent's role in social drama. And I'm excited today to talk with y'all about this topic because I know, particularly as our kids get older, starting even sometimes in about second grade, you start to see these little social troubles pop up. And then, of course, as they get into middle school, the drama feels bigger for our kids. A lot of times by high school, senior year, it's settled down, but sometimes the choices that they make because of these groups can be, um, you know, tricky. And so I think it's helpful to know no matter what age your children are, because either it's coming or you're in the middle of it. So we'll get started today. The topic comes from research by a lady named Rosalind Wiseman. And she wrote two books, one called Masterminds and Wingmen about the social lives of boys. And then she wrote another one called Queen Bees and Wannabes about the social lives of girls. And that one, if y'all are familiar with the movie Mean Girls, that movie was based on her book. So you can see in that movie the different social roles and social drama that goes on. And what was fascinating is how Wiseman spent time in school, spent time with students, interviewing them about, hey, what's happening? What does this look like? And then she came up with, these books that really dive very deeply into social drama and what's going on. And it gives you a really nice snapshot of what your child might be encountering or might send you back to your middle school, high school, late elementary school days, and might give you kind of some new understanding about what was going on then. So I highly recommend both of those books. But these tips that I came up with, a lot of the tips come from these books specifically, and I've got quotes from them, so you'll be able to see that. But then also they come from other research and just other experiences and other conferences that I've been to. So it's a little bit of a conglomeration, but I figured, instead of diving deep into two different books, we'd do just a top five today, top five tips for parents, things you can do as a parent. What is your role when your child faces social drama? Because particularly as our kids get older, right, we've got you start in the infant age and you are so involved, like every decision in their lives is actually your decision, and everything they experience, it's because you decided that it was going to be a good experience. And then as they get a little older and maybe go to preschool, then they've got friends and teachers, and things are happening to them during the day that you don't know about, and you have to find out from them. And suddenly you're a little bit separated from their experience and you're not in control as much anymore. And that can be a little bit scary for parents. And then you send them to elementary school, and suddenly the playground drama begins, the in the hallway drama begins, the oh, who sits next to who in the class, who gets to choose, that kind of stuff begins. And we start to see our children get hurt. And as a parent, that is the thing that I don't know about y'all, but for me, it's the hardest moment when I see my children get hurt for me to take a step back and assess it like a parent should, as opposed to like a protector would. And sometimes as parents, we need to be protectors, but a lot of times we actually need to play a different role, and that can be the most helpful for our children. So let's dive into our first tip. When your child is experiencing social drama, the number one thing that or the number one mistake we make as parents, I guess, is that we either really maximize the problem and we blow it all out of proportion, or we minimize it and we're like, that's not a big deal, don't worry about it. So let's take the minimizing first. A lot of times we have perspective as parents, right? That like, oh, we have the long view. I've lived 41 years. I've been through when my best friend chose to sit next to someone else at lunch. And I know it's not a big deal. And I know that I'm a better off when I shake it off and I've got that perspective. But we have to remember that our children don't have that perspective. And for them, their best friend not playing with them on the playground, or their best friend making a joke that really kind of hit a little too close to home, or their best friend, inviting someone else to play. Those things that seem little right now to us can actually be pretty big for them. And so we have to be careful that we don't minimize the experience for them. That, we've got to treat them with dignity. They are a human who's experiencing a hurt. And when we treat those concerns seriously, and don't say, oh, that's so mature, or oh, that really doesn't matter, you've got to grow up a little bit. When we trivialize, what we actually do is we end up kind of inadvertently telling our children, you don't, I don't need to listen to you, or I'm not a safe person to come to when you're feeling hurt because I'm not going to listen. And, as parents, that's the last thing we want. We want to be the person they come to when they've got problems, right? Because we actually do have a helpful perspective. And so we can not trivialize, but we can also help them get a perspective. And that's the important part of this. So number one mistake is you minimize the problem. I will say, just stereotypically, that kind of tends to be dads, right? Where it's like, don't worry about it, or tough up, or buck up, boyo, right? Whereas moms, stereotypically, again, totally stereotyping, but tend to be the mama bear who's like, what? I'm going to call that parent and ream them out for their child being a jerk to you today, or whatever. Or we're never having that friend over again, whatever. So a lot of times that comes from our protective nature when we may accidentally maximize the problem. Like, what? You got left out on the playground? Oh my gosh, this is a huge deal. And when we do that, we actually are telling our kids we don't think they can handle it. And we don't want to send that message either, right? We want to be the person they can come talk to so that they can gain confidence and that they can have a trusted place to process, but that also they can go out and live their own lives. And this can be as early as, first, second grade, when they're starting to encounter those moments of social hurt. We can be the person who they can come process with. And when you start that habit early, then it will continue, right? Because suddenly you are the person they do the processing with. So, but when we maximize and, oh my gosh, and this is huge, when our initial reactions, when they tell us, one of the great things I learned is like, don't freak out, right? That's when you've got to put on, like, practice in the mirror, your parent face, like, wow, thanks so much for telling me. Because inside you might be going like flames, fire, holy cow, I cannot believe this. And maybe you're going to go, gosh, that's a lot. I might need a chance to think about that. What have you been thinking about with respect to that? And give yourself a little bit of time for your amygdala to come down, for your protectiveness to calm down. Because, a lot of times we have our own baggage. I remember watching, in high school, either social groups leaving people out or being mean to people or being the person somebody was being mean to. And yeah, I've got things that if I hear that happens to my child, I'm going to be very triggered. I have baggage about that. And so we have to be careful not to put our baggage on our kids. And so number one, not maximizing, not minimizing, giving yourself a chance to process and think about, okay, I'm the adult in the room. What is the best way that I can approach this problem, and support my child, but not do it for them, and also give them the confidence to know that, like, they can handle it, and that this is a little thing, or maybe it's a big thing, but it eventually will feel little. And so that's the first tip from Wiseman. You'll see when it says MMWM, that's Masterminds and Wingmen. I quoted a lot from that book just because it was the one I've most recently read. Another really key piece is to take these opportunities to teach your kids how to process emotions in really healthy ways. So I loved these examples. The SEAL example is from Masterminds and Wingmen, and it's an acronym for a strategy that when you can share with your child and talk through with your child, like, hey, oh man, somebody's making fun of you at the lunchroom, or, a friend decided not to invite you, or, whatever it is that your child is saying, hey, here's this thing that's happening and it's really bothering me, or this happened today and I don't know what to do. So the first letter is S, and that means stop and set it up. And this comes directly from Masterminds and Wingmen. So first, it's like, okay, you teach your child when you have a big emotion that your brain is kind of on fire and it's not thinking clearly. So first you've got to breathe. You got to kind of look around, listen, and think. Like, okay, in the moment, when is the best time to confront this person? Sometimes it's in the moment. Sometimes if somebody's making fun of you, you're like, okay, I need to, in the moment, confront them. But sometimes it's like, oh, your friend didn't invite you and that really hurt your feelings. In the moment is not the time to address that, right? You want a chance to cool down. And so then you talk with your child about where's the best place to confront this person. Do you confront now? Do you confront in public? Do you confront in private? Don't forget to breathe, because a lot of times that will help kind of reset some of those brain um, firings that are going on. And so the first thing is just stop. When you are having a big emotional moment, teach your child to remove themselves from that moment and think it through. And sometimes what this looks like is, a lot of times, we can't be there in the moment and be like, see you later, buddy. And so a lot of times it's more, okay, your child comes home and she says, man, on the playground today, all the boys were chasing me and laughing, and I fell down and my underwear got shown for my dress, and I felt so embarrassed and everybody laughed at me. And you're like, oh man, sweetie, that is really tough. And I'm so sorry that happened, right? Not minimizing, not maximizing, I'm just empathizing. And then you start with a seal. Okay, stop. And that let's think about this for a moment. What do you want to do tomorrow? Do you want to readdress this situation? Do you not want to? What would that look like? And so you're helping your child think through, how am I going to stand up for myself in this moment? Or how am I going to make my needs felt? The next thing that you teach your child to do, or you talk through with your child, is the E, the explain. And that is, okay, how do you talk to your friend about, I didn't like what you said when you called me, or I didn't like how I felt when you pushed me down, or I feel worried that you didn't invite me to this. And what does that mean for our friendship? And then practicing with your child. Okay, what are you going to say? What do you want to say to so and so the next time that they make fun of you? What do you want to say to your friend because she didn't invite you over? And you give your child time to talk it through. You don't give them the words, you're the question asker. And practicing, especially with girls on this one, giving them a voice to say, I don't like this. You can't treat me like that. That is such a huge empowerment moment, and you're giving your child such a gift. Another thing is affirming and acknowledging. That's the A, right? You affirm your right or someone else's right to be treated with dignity. And you acknowledge something that you may have done that contributed to the problem. I always tell my kids, I'm like, y'all, there's not just one problem pie. There's a lot of pieces usually. And what's your slice? It might be a tiny slice of the problem pie, but we all got a slice. Sometimes I say it takes two to tango. You can't have a fight with just one person. So there's always a part that you have played. And so let's stop and think about, what are some things that you may have done to contribute to the problem? Oh, did you make fun of your friend too? Or in that moment when she made fun of you, did you escalate it and go right back? Or, did you walk away? And so helping them take a second and see the perspective and go, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that. Maybe I need to apologize for that. And that might help restore our relationship. That's a huge way that, as a parent, just by asking some key questions, you can help your kid start to have that emotional intelligence of like, oh yeah, like I have a role to play in this too, and I can influence things by the way I act. So teaching your child to affirm and acknowledge, their piece of the problem pie, that's pretty huge. And the last thing for SEAL is the lock it in, lock it out, or take a vacation. And this is where I think as a parent, you're really teaching them to have some moments where you go, okay, so do you want to talk this through with your friend and work it out so that you're like, I'm locking it in. We are friends and we're going to work this out. Or is this I'm locking you out? Like I'm blocking you on social media. We're just not going to hang out anymore. This person's pretty toxic and our relationship isn't that great right now. We're just not going to be friends. I'm cutting it off. Or maybe it's a vacation and you go, okay, maybe with this friend, like I just need to find somebody else to play with on the playground right now. Or I just need to, I really like this other person too. And I'm going to start spending a little bit more time with this other person. We're going to take a little vacation. We're not done, but we're just vacationing. And so giving your kids those words to think about, like you have options, especially it can feel like you don't in school because you're with the same 20 people or the same 50 people or the same 100 people every single day. And especially middle school, you feel like everybody's watching you. But really, there's a lot of power a child can feel when they say, okay, no, I am going to commit to this, or I am going to commit to not being part of this. And that empowers them when they can feel pretty powerless. And I think the last part of emotional intelligence that my kids' school does that I think is really helpful is when they have messed up, right? A lot of times social drama comes and it's not your kid who's the victim, it's your kid who's the instigator or the bully, or maybe you got a report home from school like, ooh, you did that on the playground, or I can't believe you said that, or you are flipping through their text messages and you notice what your child is saying and you're like, whoa, we need to have a conversation about how you're expressing your emotions and you need to learn how to apologize. The 5 A's, like I think it's really important that as parents, we hold our children accountable when they don't treat others with dignity. And so, yes, you do have a role in saying like, that's not how you do that. That's not healthy. That's not okay. What are you going to do to make it right? And the 5 A's of an apology is just you have them admit what they did wrong. I pushed you down on the playground. I called you a name. I posted a picture without your permission on social media. Whatever it is. They apologize. I am so sorry I did that. I really should not have done that. And then they ask for forgiveness. Hey, can you please forgive me? They accept the consequences of what they've done. Hey, I understand if you don't want to be friends with me for a little while, or I understand that it's going to take a while for me to rebuild trust with you. And then alter. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm never going to do that again. Or I'm going to post on social media an apology. Or I'm going to, make sure I stand up for you next time when somebody's making fun of you. Those 5 A's are crucial for our kids because a lot of times what they do, they just go, sorry, not even with eye contact, right? But teaching our kids how to do that and ensuring that they do, that's a really powerful thing as a part of our role as parents. So our number 3 is to be a proactive support. A lot of times we don't know what's happening in their lives. In fact, that's a good thing, right? We're not watching them on the playground. We're not hosting the play date. But I think it's important for them to know that we're there. They can talk to us anytime about anything and any question. I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to maximize it. I'm not going to minimize it. And a lot of that is just being supportive, right? Being proactively supportive when it's like, hey, is there anything on your mind? A lot of times that question is a great question right before bed because they're feeling soft, they're feeling open. So it's like, hey, is there anything on your mind? Any friendship drama going on at school that you want to talk about or process? Another thing, like I loved this phrase from Masterminds and Wingmen because I think, especially with boys, a lot of the way that in our time and culture they do friendship is by making fun of each other. And there's sort of that line between friend making fun of each other where it's like equal and lovely and funny and they are okay with it. And then suddenly they cross that line and it's like, oh man, you're really hurting me and this is unhealthy. And so I loved this phrase. Like, I know it's really common for guys to tease each other so much that sometimes it goes over the line. So if that ever happens to you, you can talk to me. Or if you don't want to talk to me, let's think of someone you would like to talk to. And I think that's huge because a lot of times as parents, we think, well, you should talk to me. But sometimes it's just they're not in a spot where they feel like they can talk to us. Or maybe we've got some healing to do because we overreacted or underreacted or, weren't healthy in the way we expressed our emotions about their problems. And so but telling them that we can find somebody for you to talk to, that's huge, right? And to acknowledge that it's complicated. It's not, you should never tease anyone, right? But it's, I know sometimes this happens, right? Or even it's like, I know on social media, people are posting pictures of parties and you're not always going to get invited. And I know it can really feel hard to be excluded. So if you ever want to talk to me about it, I'd love to listen. Y'all, that proactive, before it happens, support is huge. This one is really helpful. I learned not from Masterminds and Wingmen, but from a different parenting thing that, each different stage of parenting, you kind of play a different role. So from 0 to 5, you're the authority in the home. You're the person who says, no, no, you can't climb on that. No, you can't touch that. No, please don't do that. Right. And you're teaching them to live under authority. From ages 5 to 10, you're doing the teaching, right? It's like, hey, here's how you set the table. Here's how, when you spend the night at someone's house, how you act. Here's how you shake hands with someone. And here's how, you're doing the teaching. This is how, this is why, this is how, this is why. But from about 11 to 18, you actually should start transitioning into more of a coaching role where, like, if you think about sports, the coach is a guide on the side. They're telling the player, hey, here's some things you should think about doing. But the player's actually executing, the player's experiencing all the consequences, both good and bad, of their actions. They'll come back to the coach periodically to ask for help. Maybe the coach calls a timeout and it's like, whoa, we got to, try that over. But it's really the player who's doing the stuff. And the coach is just sort of watching from afar and then giving some really good advice. And that is sort of the role that parents struggle most to merge into. But there are some questions you can keep in the back of your pocket to just help you as a parent. The question, what do you want to do about it? Or what do you think you should do? Is an amazing question because you're coaching them, right? You're giving them time and space to think about it, but you're empowering them. You are showing them, I know that you can do this. And actually, y'all, that question you can use with kids younger than 11 to 18. It's really good to get them thinking and to help them feel like, oh, my mom and dad think I know the answers to this. And that's huge. Another question that can really help you as a parent be that proactive place and a safe place for your kid. I ask this question all the time is, do you want me to just listen or do you want some advice? Because a lot of times our kids just want us to listen. And the hardest thing for me to do is just listen. But when we say that, they realize I can just come dump on my parents and they're not going to try to fix it for me. They believe in me. They know that I can do this. And you know what's funny? A lot of times after they talk it through and I say, what do you want to do about it? Or if you were the other person in the situation, what would you want you to do? Stuff like that. I don't have to have given any advice. They've given themselves the advice just by the great questions that I ask. And those are 3 good ones that can really help. So our last and final tip is help your child envision a future. So what's cool about these books, Masterminds and Wingmen and Queen Bees and Wannabes, is that they both describe different social roles that people tend to fall into. And one strategy, particularly as your kids are in middle school, is to share these roles with your children and then just be like, hey, do you think these are even true? Do you see this happening? Where do you see this happening? What would you do? What do you feel like you are? And then ask them about, help them think forward. What role do you want to play with your friends? Because a lot of times, we know from even professional athletes do this. When you envision forward, you can think through, okay, how do I want this scene to go? What do I want this to look like? What kind of person do I want to be? That envisioning can also really help our kids become the things that they want to be. And again, that's another way that we can coach them without being like, well, this is what you should say. And so questions like, what do you need to do to make that future happen? Huge, because it shows them they're empowered in social relationships, because we can't be there to fix all their problems, but what we can do is be a place of support for them. Now, I will say, finally, sometimes you are going to need a little help. Sometimes they are going to need a little help. Sometimes these situations are big and complicated and messy, and we have baggage and we're not great at this. And that's when it is amazing. Your schools, I can tell you, I worked in education. There are people there who can really help and give you good insight, right? Sometimes it's the school teachers and you just say, hey, I'm hearing this at home. What are you seeing at school? What advice do you have for me? Sometimes it's the school counselors. I'm thinking my kid is getting bullied, or I'm thinking my kid is the bully. How can you partner with me and my child to help us work through this moment? Maybe it's a school nurse. I'm noticing that my child is really having some anxiety and some depression, or maybe they're, having some kind of bigger problems. You can go to them. Also, the school admin team, they are your partners, and start with questions. I would say that this is maybe, right? there are situations where this kind of thing is warranted, but a one time your kid getting pushed down on the playground, no, right? Like you use those other 5 tips. Save these for when your kids coming home having gotten pushed down on the playground for like a couple weeks, right? Ah, suddenly like the things we're doing at home are not working. We need some help. And there will be great people to give it. Also, one of my good friends and colleagues who was on a couple weeks ago, Teddy Bear is a counselor, and she's wonderful. So we can give you some lots of resources for if you don't feel like you have great resources at school. We can give you some great resources outside of school to really help both parents and kids in those moments. So, with that being said, thank you so much for being here. I've got a feedback form if you feel like you want to give us any feedback for today. And then next week, we will be sharing a little bit of neuroscience about how the brain works and what is going on in your kid's brain and how you can use that to be a better parent. Thanks for jumping on. I really appreciate it. Thank you for being here, Sarah. You're the best.